In the gray dawn of 1944, a battered Allied tank sat silent amid shattered trees, its thin armor scarred by 14 precise German hits. Each strike tested its metal skin, yet the plate held. What happened next would challenge expectations and decide the fate of the men inside. The wind cut through the forest line, sharp and relentless, carrying the bitter cold of a January morning deep into the worn fabric of Soviet uniforms. Snow, gray and crusted with dirt, lay heavy across the frozen ground. A battered T-34 tank rumbled slowly through the trees, its steel hull scarred and dented from weeks of relentless combat. The marks of hurried repairs showed plainly, welds uneven and fresh, patches of metal barely holding fast. The tank's thick armor, once its greatest defense, now felt fragile to the men inside. Inside the cramped turret, the crew moved with practiced caution, each motion measured by years of training and recent hardship. Their eyes flicked from the faded gauges to the frost-covered periscope, assessing the dull morning light beyond the tree line. The steel plating around them was thinner than regulation, a compromise born from rushed production far behind the front. The factory that had sent this armor had barely met specifications, forcing the men to face the enemy behind a shell weaker than intended. The distant sound of German infantry echoed through the forest, boots crunching over frozen earth, weapons slung and ready. The men listened, tension tightening their chests. They had been ordered to hold this position at all costs. Retreat was not an option. The tank commander's knuckles whitened on the radio handset as he relayed orders back and forth, his voice low and steady despite the weight of their situation. One of the crew ran a gloved hand over the metal hull, the surface cold and unyielding but thinner than the steel they trusted. The thought was unspoken but heavy in the air. A single hit could pierce their fragile defense, ending the fight for all inside. Outside, the silence settled again, broken only by the distant murmur of the advancing enemy. What happens next will decide the fate of the men involved. The crew braced themselves, the cold seeping into their bones, as they waited for the first sign of battle to break the fragile quiet. The commander stood beside the tank's hull, his gloved hand tracing the cold, uneven surface of the armor plate. Frost had settled thickly in the crevices and over the jagged welds, a pale crust that caught the weak winter light. The metal felt thinner here than it should, a fragile barrier against the war outside. His fingers lingered, pressing gently as if willing the steel to hold. The chill bit through his gloves, but he remained still, focused. Inside the cramped turret, the loader shifted uncomfortably, his breath visible in tight puffs. He mumbled to himself, voice low, almost a whisper that barely reached the others. "I heard tanks like these don't come back." The words were half a confession, half a warning. No one responded immediately. The weight of that unspoken fear settled heavy between them. The gunner chuckled, a dry, humorless sound that barely masked a tightening in his jaw. His eyes were fixed on the steel plate, tracing its faded paint and rough edges. The laughter faded into silence as he exhaled slowly, the sound swallowed by the cold metal walls around them. His gaze remained locked on the thin barrier, waiting. The rattle of distant artillery echoed faintly through the frozen air, a low and steady drum that vibrated in their bones. Each man sat or stood in the confined space, listening to the war's pulse beyond their fragile shell. The mechanical clinks and groans of the tank offered a dull backdrop, but it was the far-off booms that filled the silence with tension. They were separated by inches of steel, but the threat was palpable, pressing against their nerves like the frost outside. The thin armor was their secret, an unspoken bond shared by all. It was a silent truth, visible in every quick glance and stiffened movement. Radio static crackled suddenly, breaking the fragile quiet. Orders came through in clipped bursts, voices sharp yet distant. "Stand by for contact." The phrase hung heavy in the cold air, carrying the weight of what was to come. The men exchanged looks, a brief but meaningful exchange of understanding. The time to hope was slipping away. Fingers tightened on controls, hands adjusting sights and loading mechanisms with practiced precision. The commander's eyes scanned the horizon beyond the tank's narrow vision ports, searching for movement in the gray expanse. Frost clung to his eyelashes, and his breath left brief clouds in the still air. The cold was a constant companion, biting and unrelenting, but it could not distract from the stakes. Inside, the loader's fingers trembled slightly as he checked the ammunition. His voice was barely above a whisper again. They say the Germans know this model too well. They target the weakest spots first. The gunner's eyes flickered to him, an unspoken reassurance passing between them. No words were needed. They all understood the odds. The rumble grew louder, a distant roar rising amid the echoes of frozen forest and empty fields. The tank shuddered as engines idled, a steady heartbeat beneath their feet. Each man felt the weight of waiting, the tension that stretched taut in the confined space. The thin armor was more than metal. It was a fragile promise of survival, fragile as the frost that clung to their coats. The commander's gaze shifted to the loader, then to the gunner, a quiet acknowledgement passing without sound. The fear was there, but so was something sharper: loyalty. Loyalty to each other, to the machine that kept them alive, and to the orders that bound them forward. It was a chain stronger than steel, forged in countless patrols and battles. A sudden crack from the radio jolted them again. Contact imminent. The words were simple, but they rippled through the crew like a shockwave. The gunner's hands steadied on the sight, the loader gripped the shells tighter, and the commander straightened, pushing down the cold that gnawed at his resolve. Every man prepared silently, bracing for what the thin armor could not stop. Outside, snowflakes drifted slowly, indifferent to the coming storm. The distant artillery's rhythm quickened, merging with the nearer sounds of engines and whispered commands. The tank stood alone on the frozen ground, a fragile fortress wrapped in frost and fear. What happens next will decide the fate of the men involved. The thin armor was no longer just a secret. It was their fragile shield against the unknown firestorm closing in. The moment stretched, charged with silent questions and unspoken prayers. Each breath measured, each heartbeat a steady drum in the cold. They waited for the first shadow, the first sign of the enemy. The thin steel would face its test, and with it, the loyalty of the men inside. The early morning mist hung low over the muddy fields, a thick gray envelope that swallowed shapes whole. Through this veil, the silhouettes of German tanks emerged, their dark forms gliding silently across the uneven ground. The faint, mechanical clatter of their tracks was muffled by the fog, creating an ominous whisper that grew steadily closer. Inside the cramped confines of the Soviet tank, the crew stiffened, their breath shallow in the stale air. The smell of oil and damp metal filled the space, punctuated by the distant rustling of trees. Outside, the world felt frozen, waiting. The commander's eyes narrowed, scanning the murk beyond the vision's slit. The tank's engine rumbled low beneath them, a constant reminder of their fragile refuge. The loader's hand rested lightly on the side wall, feeling the cold steel beneath his fingers. The tension inside the tank was taut, the quiet before the storm. Suddenly, the sharp crack of a shell splitting the air shattered the stillness. The sound was harsher, more piercing than any they had heard before, cutting through the mist like a knife. The impact struck the tank's side with a thunderous clang, sending a shudder reverberating through the metal. The entire vehicle trembled, a violent jolt that tossed the men against their seats. The inside walls vibrated beneath the loader's hands, but the steel stood firm, the armor holding against the blow. Dust and small flakes of paint showered down from the ceiling, settling in the dim light. The crew froze for a heartbeat, listening for the lasting echo of destruction. Then the commander's voice cut through the silence. "Report," he barked, voice strained but commanding. The words filled the cramped space, demanding certainty amid chaos. The crew responded in quick succession. "No injuries," the gunner answered, his voice steady despite the pounding of his heart. The loader shifted, running his palm along the wall once more. The metal was warm to the touch, a sign it had absorbed the blast without breaking. It was a small comfort, but one that steadied their nerves. The driver's hands trembled visibly as he gripped the controls, fingers tightening around the worn handles. He adjusted his position, biting his lip to suppress a sigh. The tension in his knuckles mirrored the anxiety etched across his face. He dared not trust the armor alone, recalling stories of tanks pierced by enemy fire like paper. Yet now, seeing the battered but intact hull, a fragile hope took root inside him. It was a hope born of survival, not victory. Outside, the muffled clatter of enemy tanks continued, a reminder that the danger had not passed. The fog still clung to the earth, hiding threats beyond their sight. Inside the tank, the men prepared themselves again, muscles taut and senses sharpened. The commander scanned the instruments, his voice low but firm. "Stay alert. They'll be back." The crew nodded, a shared understanding passing silently between them. The loader's gaze flickered to the narrow periscope, the small window onto the outside world. Through the haze, he glimpsed the advancing silhouettes, relentless and unyielding. The smell of cold metal mixed with the damp earth outside seeped through the seals. The driver's breath was steady now, controlled, though the memory of the shell's impact lingered. The tank was a fragile shield, a cage of steel and fear. In the close quarters, the men exchanged few words, each lost in their own thoughts. They knew the armor was thin, their chances slim, but the crew's loyalty to one another was unshaken. The commander's eyes met theirs briefly, a silent vow passing through the shared glance. They were bound by duty, and by the knowledge that retreat was impossible. The next moments would decide the fate of the men involved. The tank creaked softly as the crew adjusted their positions, muscles aching from hours of strain. Outside, the enemy's mechanical advance pressed on, relentless and methodical. The mist began to thin slightly, revealing jagged shapes moving with grim purpose. Inside, the men braced themselves again, hearts pounding in unison. The tension was unbearable yet necessary. They held their breath, waiting for the next inevitable strike. The shell had not broken their armor. Their resolve would not break either. The driver's fingers steadied on the controls, the loader's hands no longer trembling. The commander's voice was a steady beacon in the confined space. "We hold here. For the men behind us, for those who trust us." The crew nodded, accepting the weight of the moment. The tank was battered but not defeated. Outside, the German tanks pressed forward, their engines grinding through the mud and fog. Inside, the Soviet crew prepared to endure again, their loyalty to each other the only certainty in an uncertain world. The cold steel around them was the barrier between life and death, hope and despair. The loader pressed his hand to the warm, unbroken wall once more, a silent promise to survive. The next seconds would change the course of the confrontation. The sound of distant artillery grew louder, a dreadful drumbeat rolling across the barren field under a slate-gray sky. Then, without warning, the next barrage began its deadly descent. 4 heavy shells slammed into the tank's armor in rapid succession, each impact punctuated by a deep, earth-shaking thud. Inside the cramped hull, the crew instinctively counted the hits, their voices low and tense. 1, 2, 3, 4, the loader muttered, his breath catching as metal dust swirled around them like smoke from a fire. The air tasted thick with grit and iron, stinging their lungs and coating their tongues. A fine mist of steel shavings floated through the narrow vision slits, settling on the cramped benches and control levers. The gunner, seated at the turret's control, raised a grimy hand to wipe his eyes. His fingers came away streaked with soot and dust, the sharp grit scratching his skin. He coughed, the sound sharp and dry in the oppressive recycled. His mind raced with grim expectations, shrapnel tearing into flesh, blood pooling in the confined space, the sharp crack of bones breaking under pressure. But instead, there was only noise. The tank shuddered violently, the thin armor groaning like old metal bending under strain, but it held. The shell impacts reverberated through the interior, a harsh percussion that rattled teeth and sent small tools clattering from their mounts. The crew exchanged quick, silent glances. Faces were pale, eyes wide but controlled, betraying barely concealed disbelief. Fear tightened their throats like a knot, but they held still, refusing to let panic take root. The war outside was chaos incarnate, But inside, time seemed to constrict to the narrow space between breaths and heartbeat. The tank's inner world shrank to steel and survive. The smell of hot gun oil mixed with the metallic tang of dust and sweat. Fingers clenched on handles and buttons, knuckles blanching under the pressure. The radio operator tightened his grip on the headset, waiting for orders through the static, though every second felt like an eternity. Outside, the shell impacts had flattened grass and churned the dirt into mud. The sky, heavy with clouds, seemed to press down on the soldiers like a silent judge. The crew heard the faint creak of the tank's armor flexing under the repeated blows, the thin plates groaning but stubbornly refusing to give way. Each man carried his own silent prayer. The driver's eyes flicked to the gauges, then back to the narrow slit that offered a view of the smoke and ruins beyond. The loader's jaw was set tight. He gripped the spent shell casings he'd just cleared with shaking hands. The gunner's breath came in shallow bursts, muscles tense but ready. No one spoke, but the shared tension was palpable. The tank was a sanctuary and a tomb, a thin metal shell against a relentless storm. The men could feel the vibrations ripple through the hull, the force of the explosions pounding against their chests. Yet the armor held firm, an unyielding barrier between them and the destruction outside. A faint metallic ping echoed inside as a small fragment ricocheted off the turret's interior. The gunner flinched but remained at his post, eyes scanning the smoky horizon through the periscope. The world outside was chaos, flashes of fire and falling debris, but inside a fragile calm endured. What happens next will decide the fate of the men involved. The tension tightened further, the crew bracing for another wave or the enemy's counterstrike. Each second stretched, dense with unspoken fear and resolve. The thin steel walls flexed again under a distant explosion, a constant reminder of vulnerability. But for now, the tank remained whole, a small island of survival amid destruction. The men inside understood that each moment endured was a victory, though it came at the cost of relentless anxiety. The gunner adjusted his headset, trying to steady his shaking hands. The cold sweat on his brow mingled with the grime that coated his face. He caught the briefest glance from the driver, a look that said, "We're still here." But for how long? Stay with this moment, everything is about to shift. The next seconds would change the course of the confrontation, testing the limits of steel and loyalty in the heart of battle. Outside, the air hung heavy with the acrid scent of gunpowder and burnt oil. The tank's engine hummed, a constant reminder of the fragile life beating beneath the armored shell. The men's breathing filled the cramped space, measured and tense. They knew that beyond the metal, the war would continue, unforgiving and indifferent. But inside, loyalty to one another, to the tank, and to survival bound them, silent and unyielding. The thin plate may have bent, but it had not broken. Neither had they. The gray sky pressed low over the frozen forest clearing, swallowing most sound except the crunch of boots in snow and distant murmurs of German voices. Outside, the infantry crept forward, rifles raised, confident the Soviet tank was immobilized. A few soldiers glanced warily at the blackened metal hull, its tracks half buried, but their eyes held barely concealed certainty. To them, this machine was finished, just another trophy for their advancing line. Inside the cramped tank, the loader's hands trembled as he reached for another shell. His fingers fumbled over cold steel, the weight suddenly heavier than before. The faint metallic clang of the round against the loader's seat seemed louder, echoing in the confined space. Outside, muffled footsteps grew nearer, but within these walls another battle raged, a struggle between fear and resolve. A sudden ricochet struck the hull with a ringing clang, shaking the tank and splinters of ice scattering over the loader's gear. The sharp sound froze the loader's breath, his pulse thundered in his ears. For a moment time slowed, and the cold silence between shots felt endless, as if the very air was waiting. The driver, seated just ahead, let out a short burst of laughter, a bark that shattered the tension. It was nervous, raw, a reflex against the tightening grip of fear. His eyes flicked to the loader, to the commander, as if to say they were still alive, still together. That brief sound stirred something in the men, a fragile spark of adrenaline. The commander's voice broke the silence, steady but urgent. "Machine gun fire." His words were clipped, no room for doubt. The gunner's fingers tightened on the trigger, and the mounted machine gun roared to life, spitting tracer rounds into the falling snow. Each bright streak cut the gray air, vivid against the muted white and black landscape. Outside, the tracers arced toward the advancing infantry, some finding target, others burying in the snow. The sudden burst of fire interrupted the Germans' step, forcing them to seek cover behind tree trunks and fallen branches. For that instant, the thin armor of the tank felt like an impenetrable shield, a refuge amid the chaos. Inside, the tank's interior vibrated with the machine gun's recoil and the distant thuds of incoming fire. The loader finally settled the shell into the breech, his breath steadying. The driver gripped the controls tighter, eyes fixed on a path through the snow and trees. The commander scanned forward, calculating, waiting for the next moment to press the advantage. Outside, the infantry hesitated, regrouping, reevaluating the threat. The echoes of gunfire mingled with the whisper of the wind through bare branches, carrying the metallic scent of cold steel and spent gunpowder. The cold seemed to deepen, seeping through the tank's seams, but inside the men were alive with tension and purpose. The loader's hands steadied as the commander barked another order. The tank's main gun rumbled, the barrel swinging toward a target just beyond the trees. The loader's earlier fear had not vanished, but it had sharpened into focus. The fight was far from over. What happens next will decide the fate of the men involved. The thin layer of ice on the gun's sight reflected the cold light of dawn, as outside, shadows shifted. The next seconds would change the course of the confrontation. The tank crew braced, locked together by necessity and loyalty, each man aware that survival depended on their unity. The driver's laughter had faded, replaced by a steady rhythm of commands and response. Inside the confined space, the men became parts of a machine, listening for every sound. A crackle, a shout, a rifle's ping. The snow muffled some noises, amplified others, but none of it escaped their attention. The tracers continued to dance across the clearing, a deadly ballet that marked the boundary between life and death. For a moment, the tank was not just a battered vehicle, but a bastion of resistance, holding ground against the cold advance of enemy infantry. Stay with this moment, everything is about to shift. The tension inside the tank was palpable, nerves taut like overused cables. Yet beneath the surface, an unspoken loyalty bound the men, a resolve forged in the urgency of battle. Outside, the snow began to fall heavier, swirling in the wake of gunfire, blurring the edges of the battlefield. The German infantry adjusted their positions, wary now but undeterred. The moment of hesitation was brief, the fight pressed on. Inside the tank, the crew braced for what was coming, hands steady on steel, eyes sharp on shadows. The loader slid the shell home, the driver flexed his fingers on the controls, and the commander's gaze locked forward, poised to strike again. In this frozen forest, where silence and gunfire interwove, the battered tank was still a symbol of defiance, of survival, and above all, of the loyalty that held these men together in the darkest hour. The radio sputtered to life, a harsh crackling voice breaking the tense silence inside the tank's cramped compartment. Static hissed between desperate words. T-34 down, East Ridge crew lost. The voice trembled with held-back panic, strained to be heard over the battlefield's muffled roar. Then abrupt silence. No further transmission followed. The crew exchanged glances, the weight of the message sinking slowly into the cold air around them. Outside, the sky hung low with clouds, heavy and gray, the kind that promised rain but delivered only a lingering chill. The wind stirred the dust at their feet, carrying the distant echo of artillery fire and the faint rattle of distant machine guns. Inside the tank, the air was thick with oil, sweat, and the faint copper tang of spent shells. The plastered faces of the men, grim and worn, told the story of hours spent in unyielding battle. The loader shifted uneasily, his eyes drawn involuntarily to the tank's side plate. It was thin steel, no thicker than a man's hand, but it had saved them. This plate bore fresh scars now, dents and scratch marks from recent impacts, proof of shells that had struck but failed to penetrate. Each mark was a silent testament, a narrow margin between life and death. The loader reached out, his hand trembling slightly as he pressed his palm against the cold metal. The steel was rough beneath his fingers, scarred and pitted but still solid. His lips moved in a quiet, barely audible whisper. It was impossible to tell whether he was offering thanks to the unseen forces that had spared them, to the metal that had taken the blows, or to fate itself. The gesture felt like a fragile talisman amid the chaos. The commander, sitting rigid in his hatch, noticed the gesture. His jaw tightened, eyes narrowing behind the goggles smeared with grime. There was no room for superstition or hesitation here. The battlefield demanded resolve. Doubt was a luxury no man could afford. His voice came low and steady as he barked orders to the driver, a reminder of the work still ahead. "Keep moving. We hold here." Around them, the tank creaked and groaned as it adjusted position. The engine's low rumble was a constant companion, a reminder of both power and vulnerability. The thin armor that shielded them was a fragile shell, a barrier against the storm outside. Each dent told a story of survival, but also of the ever-present danger waiting beyond the next ridge. The radio crackled again, but this time it was only static and fragments of distant voices, broken and unintelligible. The crew listened with bated breath, the silence between messages thick with anticipation and dread. They knew another tank could fall at any moment, another crew lost to the grinding machinery of war. The loader's hand stayed pressed to the scarred plate, a silent anchor amid the uncertainty. His eyes scanned the horizon through the periscope, searching for any sign of the enemy's next move. The cold steel beneath his fingers offered no answers, only steadfastness. It was a reminder of the narrow line they walked daily. The commander's gaze hardened, fixed on the war-torn landscape stretching beyond the tank. Smoke curled in the distance, blotting out patches of the sky. The ground was churned and broken, a scarred terrain reflecting the conflict's brutal toll. No time remained for hesitation or second-guessing. Inside, the men shared a brief, unspoken understanding. Loyalty to each other was their shield as much as the metal plating they relied upon. They were bound by duty and survival, held together by the fragile threads of trust in the midst of destruction. The radio fell silent once more. Outside, the wind picked up, stirring the dust and filling the air with the scent of burnt oil and wet earth. The loader released his hand from the plate slowly, leaving behind a faint imprint on the cold steel. The moment lingered, heavy with unspoken fears and quiet determination. What happens next will decide the fate of the men involved. The commander's voice cut through the tension again, firm and resolute. "Hold position. Watch your sectors. We move only on my command." His words were sharp, a lifeline in the uncertainty. The crew settled into their roles, each man aware that their survival depended on focus and loyalty. The tank remained poised on the ridge, silent but alert, bearing the fresh scars of battle. The crew inside braced themselves against the unknown, bound to the thin steel and to each other. Stay with this moment, everything is about to shift. The sharp crack of an explosion shattered the tense quiet inside the tank. A direct hit slammed against the side armor, sending a shudder through the hull. The thin metal bent inward with a sickening groan, distorting the shape of the tank's flank. Sparks erupted, bouncing erratically across the steel floor, casting brief, harsh shadows on the crew's faces. The dim lights flickered, threatening to fail amid the chaos. Inside the cramped compartment, the smell of burnt wiring mingled with the cold metal scent of lubricants and sweat. The tank shuddered again under its own weight, trembling like a wounded beast. Each man instinctively reached for the others, eyes searching for signs of injury beneath the smoke and dust. Fingers brushed against bloodied uniforms, but no one cried out. The gunner, his face smeared with grime and sweat, spat on the floor. His voice was low but sharp, trembling with a mixture of fear and anger. "We're dead men, all of us. That hit could have torn us apart." His words hung heavy in the confined space, a raw admission of the danger they faced. The commander's eyes burned with resolve beneath his helmet. His voice cut through the tension like a whip. "No, we are not dead men. We are soldiers. Focus on the fight. Reload." Fire, his command was steady, unyielding, a lifeline amid the panic. The crew snapped to attention, hands moving with practiced precision despite the shock. The loader slid a shell into the breach with a metallic clank that echoed through the tank like a heartbeat. The engine's low rumble underscored the moment, steady and relentless. Outside, the world was blurred smoke and exploded earth, but inside, the crew's concentration sharpened, anchored by necessity. The gunner adjusted his sights, nostrils flaring as he steadied his aim through the narrow viewport. The commander leaned forward, eyes scanning the shattered landscape beyond the periscope. The radio crackled faintly with distant orders, a reminder of the wider struggle beyond their isolated fight. With a heavy guttural roar, the main gun fired. The concussion rattled the tank's frame, vibrating through the metal plates and into the men's bones. The echo of the shot lingered, swallowed by the surrounding chaos. Seconds stretched taut as they awaited the result, hearts pounding with the weight of survival. The tank's hull rattled again as enemy shells struck nearby, the brittle steel bearing the onslaught like a shield. Each clang was a reminder of the fragile barrier between life and death. The crew exchanged quick glances, silent acknowledgments of their shared peril and determination. Smoke seeped from a small crack near the engine compartment, a thin, bitter trail that stung their eyes. The mechanic wiped his face with the sleeve of his uniform, muscles tense beneath the grime. He was already planning repairs in his mind, despite the urgency of the battle. The commander's voice remained calm but urgent. "Keep eyes open. We hold position. We wait for the next opening." His tone left no room for doubt or hesitation. The men nodded, their fear corralled by the discipline forged through countless drills and shared hardships. Outside, the distant rumble of tanks and gunfire painted the battlefield with relentless noise. The air was thick with the acrid scent of burnt diesel and explosives. The ground trembled beneath the tank's treads, a constant reminder of the war's unforgiving presence. Inside, silence briefly settled between bursts of action, a fragile pause filled with the sound of breathing, shifting gear, and the quiet prayers unspoken. The crew's eyes met in fleeting moments, conveying a loyalty deeper than words. They were bound by duty and survival, a fragile brotherhood in steel. The gunner broke the silence with a muttered curse, voice rough but steady. "We're still here. Not dead yet." His words were a defiant whisper, a small flame against the vast darkness pressing in from all sides. The commander allowed himself a brief nod of acknowledgement before returning to his vigil. The tank's heartbeat resumed, the clang of shells on brittle steel, the steady rhythm of their fight against odds that never waned. What happens next will decide the fate of the men involved. The air inside the tank tightened with unspoken anticipation, every movement heavier with consequence. They were locked in a fragile balance between destruction and survival, each breath carrying the weight of loyalty and loss. The tank's hull shimmered faintly, coated with grime and dust, as the loader marked the 14th tally onto the wooden ammo crate with white chalk. Each stroke was deliberate, worn from nervous fingers trembling slightly under the fatigue. 14 hits. 14 impacts against the metal beast that bore them through the shattered landscape. The mark stood out starkly, a stark ledger of survival written in chalk and sweat. Inside the cramped interior, the air was thick with the scent of burnt oil and sweat. The men's clothes clung to their skin, damp from hours of labor and tension. The loader's voice broke the heavy silence, rough and tinged with forced humor. "Looks like she's charmed, lads." His attempt at levity was met with a half-smile from the gunner, who nodded in weak agreement. The word charmed hung in the air, fragile as the tank's battered armor. But the driver's face remained shadowed, lips pressed tight as he gripped the steering controls. His eyes, sharp and tired, scanned the dim outlines beyond the viewport. "Charmed maybe," he said slowly, "but I call it a curse. This thing waiting for the moment to give out. His words cut through the small attempt at camaraderie, grounding the men in the harsh reality they faced. The creaks and groans of the tank's worn engine punctuated his warning. The loader glanced toward the driver, catching the strain beneath those tired eyes. The driver's hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the relentless burden of responsibility. Every movement of the steering wheel was a delicate negotiation, with a machine pushed beyond its limits. The tank's suspension rattled over the uneven ground, each jolt a reminder of the fragile balance between movement and breakdown. Outside, the muted rumble of distant artillery throbbed like a heartbeat, steady and relentless. The men inside the tank heard it as a low, constant pressure, pressing against their eardrums beneath the clatter of the machine. It was a reminder the front was never far, even in these moments of brief stillness. The tension inside the tank thickened, every breath measured, every glance fleeting yet meaningful. The loader's fingers lingered on the chalk marks, tracing the lines without making another. 14 seconds borrowed, he muttered, voice low enough only for those inside to hear. The phrase was a shared understanding, spoken between men who counted survival not in days, but in moments. Each mark was a second stolen from death's reach, a fragile proof of endurance that could vanish with the next hit. The gunner shifted in his seat, adjusting his helmet, the weight of it unfamiliar yet necessary. His eyes flicked toward the loader's marks, then back to the driver. "If this tank's cursed, it's the kind that keeps us alive," he said quietly. His words were a thin thread of hope, fragile and unsteady, barely holding against the undercurrent of exhaustion that gripped them all. The driver exhaled slowly, the line between weariness and determination thin and wavering. "Maybe," he said, voice taut, "but curses break. And when this one does, we're out here alone." The silence that followed was immediate and thick, punctuated only by the soft clank of metal and the distant explosion of shells. The men absorbed the weight of his words, each one knowing the truth beneath the stoicism. Outside, the wind sifted through shattered buildings and broken trees, carrying dust and the faint odor of burning. The tank's engine coughed, uneven and strained, a mechanical sigh that seemed to echo the men's internal fatigue. The loader rubbed his jaw, the rough skin cracked from days without proper rest. The chalk marks remained, stark and unyielding, a testament not just to the tank's endurance but to the fragile lives it carried. The tension wrapped around the men like a second skin. Every word was cautious, every silence full of unspoken fears. The loader caught the eye of the gunner, a silent exchange conveying both hope and dread. The driver's hands tightened on the controls, knuckles pale beneath the grime. The tank, battered and scarred, was their fragile shield against the relentless dangers beyond. What happens next will decide the fate of the men involved. The loader broke the silence with a dry chuckle, shaking his head. "You think the brass would believe us if we told them this thing's both our lucky charm and our doom?" His joke was met with a tired shake of the head, the humor barely lifting the heavy air. Yet beneath the exhaustion, a thread of loyalty bound them together, unspoken but fiercely present. The driver's gaze flicked toward the viewport again, eyes narrowing against the fading light. The tank's metal groaned softly under the weight of the moment, as if acknowledging its own fragile existence. The men settled into the uneasy quiet, each one listening to the rhythm of their own breath, the distant thunder of war and the subtle ticking of survival. Stay with this moment, everything is about to shift. The loader, still tracing the chalk marks, finally added a 15th line, smaller and less confident than the others. The chalk dust fell softly onto the crate, a fragile mark against the darkness. 14 hits behind them, one more now recorded. Each a borrowed second, each a testament to the men's loyalty to each other and their shared struggle to endure. The sudden roar of the last tank engine faded into the cold, gray morning. A thin veil of smoke drifted from the battered Soviet tank's turret, its metal hull marred with dents and pockmarks. The assault was over. Outside, the distant rumble of German vehicles receded, their engines growing faint before silence swallowed the battlefield. The once violent clash had resolved into a heavy, uneasy calm. The Soviet crew remained seated inside their cramped compartment, faces pale under layers of grime and exhaustion. The tank's thin armor plate, once a smooth surface, now bore the scars of relentless fire. Its edges were warped, bent inward and outward by the force of impacts. Small craters peppered the metal like bullet holes, some large enough to glimpse the bare interior framework beneath. The faint smell of burnt powder and cold steel lingered in the air, a harsh reminder of the fight's intensity. No one spoke. The men looked at the scarred hull around them, their breaths visible in the freezing air that seeped through tiny cracks. The radio operator's hands trembled slightly as he reached for the hatch lever. Outside, the wind bit sharply at exposed skin, carrying the scent of wet earth and decaying foliage. With a slow creak, the heavy hatch swung open, releasing the crew into the gray light. The sky was overcast, the sun a pale disk behind thick clouds. The field was silent, save for the distant caw of crows and the crunch of frozen mud beneath worn boots. Engineers arrived soon after, their movements precise and measured. Bundled in thick coats, their faces marked by the harsh weather, they approached the tank with a mixture of curiosity and disbelief. They circled the vehicle, their eyes scanning every dent, every scar. Fingers traced the warped edges of the thin plate, hands steady despite the cold. They exchanged brief words, heads shaking in quiet disbelief. None could explain how the armor, so thin and battered, had endured the assault. Cameras clicked in rapid succession, capturing the damage from every angle. The engineers documented the piece of metal that had defied expectation, a fragile barrier that had withstood the fury of German firepower. The photographs would later become part of reports, but for now, they served as silent testimony to the crew's survival. The men stood close, watching the experts work, their faces a mix of relief and lingering shock. The tank commander ran a gloved hand over the surface of the hull, feeling the uneven texture beneath his palm. His eyes narrowed as he considered the improbable resilience of the armor. Around him, the crew quietly cleaned their weapons, preparing for whatever might come next. The frost in the air seeped into their bones, yet none moved to warm themselves. The taste of cold metal and spent gunpowder still clung to their lips. A distant rumble grew faintly again, perhaps the sound of retreating German forces or the approach of reinforcements. The men exchanged glances, aware that the battle was momentarily paused but far from over. The silence carried weight, filled with unspoken questions and the gravity of their shared ordeal. What had allowed their tank to survive against all odds? The engineers could only speculate, their expertise unable to penetrate the mystery. As the day edged forward, the light shifted, casting long shadows across the scarred landscape. The frozen earth reflected the bleakness of the moment, barren and unyielding. The crew gathered near the tank, the outline of their breath visible amidst the cold. Loyalty to one another, forged in fire and steel, held them together more than words could convey. The memory of the assault hung heavy, a stark reminder of loss and survival entwined. The tank's thin armor stood as silent witness, battered but unbroken, much like the men it had protected. Its scars told a story of endurance, of unseen strength beneath fragility. The engineers packed their equipment, their movements subdued, as if aware they had encountered something extraordinary yet inexplicable. The crew climbed back into the tank, closing the hatch against the chill, the metal groaning softly in the stillness. In the quiet that followed, the men sat once more in the confined space, the weight of what had passed settling upon them. The battle had tested their resolve, and though victory was uncertain, their loyalty endured. Outside, the wind whispered over the scarred battlefield, carrying away the echoes of gunfire and the frozen breath of men who had faced death together. What happens next will decide the fate of the men involved. The thin plate may hold, or the enemy may return with greater force. For now, survival remains their fragile victory, etched in metal and memory alike. The night air hung cold around the battered tank, stars faint behind a veil of drifting smoke and low clouds. The crew had gathered in a rough circle around a small fire, its flickering light casting long shadows on their worn faces and smeared uniforms. The ground beneath them was hard and dusty, scorched by the day's battle. Quiet murmurs rose and fell as hands passed a crust of stale bread, breaking off uneven chunks to share. A worn tin cup was passed along, but it held no water tonight, only the bitter taste of exhaustion. Cigarettes changed hands next, the faint burn of tobacco mingling with the scent of smoke and oil. The men lit their smokes from the same sputtering flame, the orange glow briefly illuminating the lines of worry etched deep into their skin. Their eyes were tired, searching the dim firelight for some comfort in the company of others. The night was unusually still, broken only by the occasional crackle of burning wood or the soft clink of metal against stone. The thin armor of their tank was the unspoken presence between them, a fragile barrier that had somehow held against the relentless barrage. It was the subject they would return to again and again. The radio operator, tracing the scars on his sleeve, spoke first. "I thought the end had come when the shell hit near the turret," he said quietly. His voice was rough, dry from dust and silence. The whole tank shook like a thunderclap. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The driver nodded, staring into the fire as if it might swallow his memories whole. There was that moment when the engine stalled, and I thought we'd never move again. I could almost hear the enemy closing in, his hands clenched into fists, the knuckles pale beneath the grime. But somehow we kept going. One by one, each man told the story of his own near end. The gunner spoke of the shrapnel that grazed his helmet. The loader recalled the shell that exploded just beyond the hatch. Their voices were low, careful not to disturb the fragile peace that had settled over the group. Each confession was a thread weaving them closer, men bound by the fine line between life and death. The commander leaned forward, pulling his coat tighter against the chill. His face was shadowed and tired, the weight of command heavy on his shoulders. "I wrote a letter to my wife," he confessed, his voice steady but carrying a quiet strain. "I folded it carefully and tucked it inside my coat. I wasn't sure if I'd live to send it. I thought it might be the last thing she'd ever have from me." His eyes rested on the fire, distant and hard to read. A brief silence followed his words. The loader broke it with a rough laugh that sounded hollow in the stillness. "Funny thing," he said, shaking his head. "I never wrote mine. I kept telling myself there'd be time, that I'd make it back before I needed to." He flicked ash from his cigarette, the smoke tracing a lazy spiral upward. "Guess I was wrong." They all fell quiet then, the laughter fading into the dark. The fire crackled, sending a sudden flare that lit their faces again, faces marked by dirt, sweat, and something far heavier: survival. They shared no more words, each lost in the memory of the day's close calls, the thin armor that held, the moments when death had seemed certain. Outside their circle, the cold night pressed in, the distant sounds of war muffled but never gone. Somewhere beyond the horizon, artillery rumbled faintly, an unending reminder of the fragile bubble in which they now rested. Yet inside that small ring of firelight, a quiet understanding had taken hold. They had survived what should have broken them. The commander reached into his coat and pulled out the folded letter, holding it briefly in the firelight before tucking it back away again. No one spoke. The letter was a symbol of the loyalty that bound them, not just to families far away, but to each other. In the vast, uncaring chaos of war, this fragile bond was their shield. The men shifted closer to the fire as the night deepened. The bread was gone, the cigarettes nearly finished. The quiet settled again, heavier now, as if the weight of what they had endured was finally being felt in the stillness. They didn't know what dawn would bring. But for these moments, surrounded by the bare earth and the fragile light of the fire, they were together. What happens next will decide the fate of the men involved. The quiet resilience of this night would be tested in the coming hours, but in this circle, beneath the cold stars, survival was a shared victory. The thin armor had shielded their bodies, but it was loyalty that had sustained their spirits. The fire burned low, shadows blending with the darkness. Each man stared into the dying embers, carrying the day's losses silently with it. The loyalty they held was invisible but unbreakable, a thread connecting all who had faced the abyss and still remained. In the cold night with the war far from over, that truth was all they could hold onto. Dawn filtered pale and cold through the shattered canopy above the battered tank. The ground was still damp, the air heavy with the scent of oil, dust, and spent gunpowder. The crew lingered nearby, their faces shadowed, eyes fixed on the grim task ahead. The tank sat silent, its engine cooling, waiting. The morning light caught the edges of its armor, worn thin in places where the metal had barely held against the blast. A group of engineers had gathered close, their hands dark with grease and sweat. One of them pulled out a welding torch, igniting a blue flame that hissed softly in the quiet morning. With careful precision, the torch bit into the armor's surface, melting through the section that had earned the grim nickname among the men, the too thin plate. The cutting arc glowed brighter, sparks falling like brief stars to the dirt below. The crew watched without a word, the air thick with a mixture of relief and tension. The metal plate, once a shield and near a coffin, was slowly freed from the tank's hull. Nearby, the engineers exchanged low voices, their talk technical but weighted with the stakes that lay beneath. The angle on this section was a gamble, one said, fingers tracing invisible lines in the air. Too shallow, it deflects less. Too thick, and the weight slows us down in the mud. Another shook his head. It's luck as much as design. Metallurgy can only do so much when the shell finds the seam. The words were matter of fact, but carried the quiet weight of lives balanced on these calculations. The thin plate, now detached, was carefully lifted and hauled away by rough hands, its edges jagged where the torch had cut through. It was heavier than it looked, warped and scorched, telling a story of near disaster. The men glanced at it with a mixture of respect and unease, a reminder of what had been barely enough and what might not have been enough at all. The commander approached the tank, his boots crunching on loose gravel. He ran his hand slowly over the new steel plate, mounted in place of the old one. The surface was cold, heavier, thicker, its presence undeniable. His fingers pressed down on the metal, feeling the weight of the protection it offered. The difference wasn't just in the feel of the tank. It was in the silence that fell over the crew, the sense that something had shifted in the fragile balance between vulnerability and survival. The tank, once a familiar companion marked by scars and memories of fire, now carried the burden of its new armor. The men climbed back into their positions, their movements deliberate, quiet. The driver's hands tightened on the controls. The gunner's eyes scanned the horizon with renewed focus. The radio operator adjusted his headset, the faint static filling the cap. Each man carried the memory of what the thin plate had endured, and what it had almost failed to endure. Inside the cramped interior, the faint smell of heated metal mingled with the lingering residue of diesel and sweat. The tank's engine rumbled softly to life, a steady heartbeat against the tense silence. The men shared glances, unspoken communication passing between them. They were changed, not just by the heavier steel now shielding them, but by the knowledge that their lives had been stretched to the edge and pulled back. Outside, the silence was broken only by distant birdsong and the occasional rustle of wind across shattered branches. The battlefield remained still, as if waiting. What happens next will decide the fate of the men involved. The tank moved forward slowly, its new armor catching the first light of morning with a dull gleam. Each turn of the treads stirred the dust and memories beneath them. The men knew the danger was far from over. The thicker steel would offer better protection, but the war would continue to test the limits of their endurance and loyalty. The quiet of this moment was deceptive. They carried within them the weight of what the thin plate had given, and what it nearly took away. Their bond, forged in fire and shadow, was sealed by survival and the invisible thread of trust. As they rolled onward, the commander's gaze lingered on the horizon, where smoke still rose from distant fields. The tank felt different beneath him, heavier but steadier. The men inside were marked by loss and hardened by loyalty. This was a new chapter for them, one written in cold steel and silent resolve. Stay with this moment, everything is about to shift. The weight of what they had lost and what they still held onto moved silently with them, like a shadow. The tank's engine thrummed steadily, a sound of endurance amid uncertainty. This pause, this quiet acceptance, was the fragile heart of survival. Outside, the morning deepened, light growing sharper and colder. The tank disappeared slowly into the rising mist, its new armor catching every shadow. The men inside were changed, not only by the patchwork steel, but by the invisible scars of battle. Their loyalty remained, a quiet force stronger than any armor. The battered tank rested in a sunlit field, its thin armor scarred but intact, a fragile shell of survival amid ruin. Official reports filed the vehicle as damaged, noting the crew escaped without injury, leaving the miracle of the thin plate scarcely mentioned. For those who had lived it, the story never faded into records or statistics. It remained a private mark, raw and confusing, lodged deep within memory's restless shadows. Outside, the war continued its relentless rhythm. Engines roared back to life. New tanks rolled forward with thicker steel and reinforced plating. Yet none carried the silent weight of that fragile defense, the nearly invisible margin that had shielded the men from destruction. For the crew, survival was a measurement of millimeters, a razor's edge balanced between life and death. Each glance at the dented metal recalled the suspended moment when fate held its breath. They spoke little of that day, and when they did, words were sparse, heavy with what went unsaid. No tales of heroics filled the barracks, only the quiet understanding that loyalty to each other had been the strongest armor. They had faced death together, waited for it in the shaking dark, and walked away with scars unseen but deeply felt. The thin line between random chance and human endurance lingered in every restless sleep and every silent hour after the gunfire ended. This story did not conclude with glory or certainty. It ended in the stillness of history's vast expanse, a subtle reminder that survival in war is often less about design and more about the fragile, unspoken bonds between men. Their experience echoed quietly, unresolved, in the spaces where silence held the weight of what war leaves behind.